Fran Bow is such a brilliant game, from the vibrant array of characters to the mystery behind Fran and what she can see that others can't. It is the story of a traumatised girl tormented by the Prince of Darkness, all in search for her cat Mr. Midnight and the truth behind how her parents died and who was responsible. We've looked at this universe from Little Misfortune's game. Now we will look at it through the prism of Fran Bow and explain a number of mysteries that may still be unclear to us, despite this game being like 5 years old at this point. I know I'm slow. Join me as I try and dissect the curious case of Fran Bow. Spoilers for a really old game ahead. I want to start with the main question that raised in my head as I played through Fran Bow, which was, is this all in Fran's head? Is everything created from Fran in her mind? Are the realities, are Itwood, is Thurster, is all that in Fran's head? Every time Fran takes this enhanced version of duotine, we often see a quite horrible, bloody and different version of reality to what everyone else sees. Well, I'd like to answer this first and explain just why that this in fact is not all in Fran's head and it is real in some form or another. Whilst the initial setting of the asylum for traumatised children infers early on that Fran is potentially creating another world in her mind as a result of the trauma that she has seen, when in reality, which is a loose term that I will be using a lot in this video, everything that she sees upon taking the duotine is actually there, just not in her reality. And we know this for a number of reasons, not least the fact that Little Misfortune, now that we've played that, confirms the existence of other realities in this shared universe of theirs. Fran has in fact a unique ability to enter what is called the ultra reality being the interdimensional place located in between the 5 realms of essential existence, and this is really important. It often shows elements from each of the FREE discussed in Leon Castillo's diary, and I will briefly break them down here. So the first reality, Primeve, is the reality of light, and it's home to the Volocus, the light creatures with the shield helmets that we see in Thurster. Speaking of Thurster, the second reality is Thurster, is the reality of life and growth, hence all of the roots and insects and things like that. The third reality that most of us will know is the human world, or Pandora. It's the reality of willpower and consciousness. The fourth reality, as we learned a lot about in Little Misfortune, is Cernezide, the reality of death, where children who are broken are taken after passing on, as we saw with Little Misfortune. And then the fifth reality, Mabuka, darkness, where Rema, her son, resides, as does the Luciferns, and I believe the Kamalas. I think the Kamalas reside there, but they're also seen as in Thurster and other places as well. With the ultra reality being a pocket in the middle of all those realities that Fran and other children can enter and see parts of all those realities at once. That's the important thing, and that was something that was confusing me a lot. I couldn't understand what Fran was seeing a lot of the time when she was taking the duotine, but in fact she was seeing parts of all of the realities at different times. It just so happened, for one reason or another, she was seeing a lot of what I'm guessing is stuff from the fifth reality. Also, just for context in the whole universe of it, the Beyond, where Morgo in Little Misfortune came from, is not part of the 5 realms of essential existence, but rather it exists outside of it, hence the name the Beyond. As it is outside the FREE, this also explains why Fran wouldn't see anything from that reality when entering the ultra reality. Makes sense, I think, to an extent. The 5 realities, or elements of that, is what Fran sees, and time in each of those realities is not a straight line as we know it, and this is where things start to get confusing. In this thirster, you actively move time through the seasons of a clock in the tree, and this, in my opinion, explains how Fran was able to meet and then talk to her younger self. She entered the Ultra Reality even without the duotine, and entered it to see a point in time in the 3rd reality where she saw her younger self at the asylum. That also raises more questions that I must admit I will struggle to answer, but I will discuss that later. We also see that Fran collects items throughout the game from the Ultra Reality. The key importance here being that she keeps those items when she leaves that reality. So as soon as she goes back into Pandora, the 3rd reality, the normal world as we know it, she still has those items that she's collected from the Ultra Reality. So how could it all not be real if she had those specific objects in both the 3rd reality and the others? I want to move on to Fran herself and the story specifically with regards to what happened to her parents and her relationship with Rema. So we know that Fran's mother and her aunt Grace, they were twins who were both experimented on at the asylum, and we see this at the end of the game because Harrison Oswald tells Fran that he has been experimenting on identical twins to try and find ways into other realities. It seems when Fran was born, she was found to be very special as well, and also was in Oswald Asylum when she was young, hence the meeting with her younger self. Now there's a lot of different ways to take this, because you could argue that that wasn't actually Fran, or it was a different Fran from a different timeline, which maybe would explain it better, because in the conversation that Fran have, younger Fran has met Leon, Castillo, Itwood and Pelantris at that age, yet the Fran that we play as hasn't, and also doesn't have any memories of it. I will talk about that in more detail, but I'm just going to say it now, it's confusing me a lot. I do believe this shows us that Fran was originally in the asylum before being taken home by her mother and father after they discovered what Oswald intended to do, which from conversations and from what we see in the asylum, it was likely going to be either the removal of the brain, like Oswald mentioned at the end of the game after he shot Fran, or some kind of lobotomy. And you see that with the twins. There's scars on their foreheads. Some of the other children in the asylum also have scars on their forehead, which could infer that they have had surgery on their brain. This was likely because Oswald believed or knew that that was the way into the other realities. Upon realising Lucia's betrayal, Fran's mother, Grace and Oswald enlist Rema in some capacity. I don't quite understand how it works, but to murder them, as mentioned at the end of the game. This was likely for a number of reasons though, not just to get rid of them because they were interfering in his work, but they also needed Fran to experience that significant trauma of losing her mother and father. They needed her to be, and this word's quite specific in a number of ways, but they needed her to be broken, as that appears to play a part in the child having the ability to enter other realities, regardless of whether they have the duotine or not, and it appears that Oswald knew this. Is it any wonder why the asylum itself is filled with children that have been physically and mentally abused? It leaves them broken to the point of giving up, which allows them apparently to see things that others can't and enter the realities that other people don't even know about. Oswald said it himself that he did Fran a favour when referencing the murder of her parents, and said that pain is connected to growth referencing his thirster, and strength. I believe the reason for this is to do with the theme of light and dark in the game, and the balance it seems to require in the universe. It's only children that are being experimented on by Oswald, no adults whatsoever. Could this be due to the happiness and pure innocence of a child who with the right environment can be completely and undeniably happy, sort of the light side, Eve, and that reality, but to unlock the door to the other realities they also need the darkness. They need that horrific and traumatizing event or situations to effectively have that balance to achieve, for lack of a better word, I guess what Fran did, which was entering the other realities. As horrible as that is to think about, without her parents dying, Fran wouldn't have been able to enter those other realities. Also, just another side note, as the next part of the video is where I'm going to talk about that stuff with younger Fran and basically be like, this is too confusing to make any sense whatsoever. On numerous occasions, Fran was called the Keeper of the Key. They said that she was the Keeper of the Key, and that was blowing my mind. I was like, what does that mean? I need to know. And then yesterday I was just thinking about it, and I was like, it makes perfect sense what it is when you think about it. The reason Fran is so special is because she can go through the door to the other realities at will without the duetine, as we see in the car when she's talking to Dr. Dean. She literally has the power in herself to unlock the door, which is why she is the Keeper of the Key. It makes perfect sense. Balancing the light with the darkness, the happiness with the sad, and that's Fran. Right, so yeah, this is where it gets really confusing, because if Fran was originally in the asylum as a young child, then there has to be a reason, or surely there must have been some sort of reference to Fran having some form of memory loss or something like that. But there isn't. There's literally nothing like that. But what does it mean? Does it mean that when Fran was her younger self, was that just another version of Fran? This isn't our Fran, it's Fran in another timeline. I want to say no. I don't want to believe that that's true, because it just confuses me greatly, and I can't piece things together. And I can't say it with evidence that Fran, after being manipulated by Rema to kill her parents, sort of pushed those memories down so she forgot them. Could it be that Fran never left the asylum at all and they just killed her parents, and Rema showed Fran killing her parents even though that didn't happen? But that would contradict, but wouldn't that contradict what the notes we see in the car with Dr. Dean are saying? They are talking about a cover-up of Fran being dead by being frozen to death in the woods, which we know for a fact is not true, because Fran is not dead. But the start of the game shows Fran going into the woods and then being collected by someone and taken to the asylum. So it gives the impression that that's the first time that Fran's in the asylum. So what about her younger self? This is what I mean. There's so many conflicting elements to this story. It really does make it difficult to piece together sort of an exact timeline of events. But in all honesty, and I know this is sort of a cop-out, but I do think that's part of the whole universe itself. Time is not a straight line as we know it. We can't say this happened and this happened to this happened and this happened. You know, a lot of Leon Castillo's diary references were in the 1800s, and Fran was born in the 1930s, I think. So yeah, and apparently he met her and stuff like that. So time is not straight in this universe. It's not a straight line. This isn't Back to the Future. This isn't Terminator time travel. This is 5 realities and beyond, layered on top of one another, intertwined through emotions and experiences. A balance of light and dark. I still don't know many things, but one thing I do know, that between guilt and fear, that's interesting, I choose happiness. I know this was kind of a weird video, and it we only covered sort of a fraction of the game itself, but I just think there's way too much to cover in one video, so I'm going to break it up. I do want to cover other characters, particularly Clara and Mia. I think I could definitely do one whole video on them. Mr. Midnight, because I've barely talked about Mr. Midnight. It's very interesting that he talks throughout the entire game, whether you've got your pills or not. However, at the end of the game, in Mabuka's den, Mr. Midnight doesn't talk. He is just a cat. Now, I could go into it for a bit because I've just had some thoughts on it as we speak, but I won't. I just need to write them down or I'll forget. But you remember, that was Fran seeking the truth, and the truth is that Mr. Midnight can't actually talk. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway. Yeah, I'm going to break up some other ones. Let me know if you want me to go into deep dive on anyone else in the game. I don't know, like Itwood, not so sure. I think he'll probably be covered a lot in the Clara and Mia episode. If there's any other aspects of the reality side, because that's the side that interests me the most, the whole universe and stuff like that. That's what sort of really interests me. And I just think, and you know, I know that it's not really an explanation of the whole game, and I'll say that straight up. I just think there's so many conflicting points in this game that kind of contradict themselves, or contradict one theory for another theory. So yeah, it's straight up long and confusing, but I'd love to hear what you guys think down in the comments. Please tell me what you think about Fran. Do you think it's all in her head, and why do you think that? What do you think about Mr. Midnight? What do you think about that last quote? In between guilt and fear, I choose happiness. Is the guilt relating to the fact that regardless of whether she was in control or not, she killed her parents? And the fear being the fear of the darkness? She chooses happiness. Did she actually die at the end? Because that's another theory. There's also a theory that Fran is a twin. That would be crazy. But anyways, thank you guys so much for what... Oh wait, what? Oh, Mr. Midnight wants to do the outro. Sorry guys, I gotta go bye. Thank you all so much for watching this. He barely even said my name the whole video. How terrible. I'm Mr. Midnight. I'm a cat! Thanks for watching.